The East Coast don't love Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg. The East Coast ain't got no love for Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg and Death Row. Y'all don't love us. Y'all don't love us.
I just wanna make you sweat.
We always felt like we're being true to everything we've always stayed representing. And our audience is worldwide. We're not even on no, we coming out here and there's some East Coast, West Coast. We got beef with the people we got beef with.
No, you gon' lose it. This Snoop. Come on, baby boo, you got to get into it.
Snoop Dogg has built quite a reputation for himself as a beloved figure the world over, but he is hiding a dark secret that could turn everything on its head.
I seen him in Atlanta. This is right after Pocket got killed, and he was in the hotel, and I seen C's. I'm like, where he at, cuz? He upstairs. I'm like, let me holler at him. He like, hold on. Because, they didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
They was...
Now, for Snoop to say him and Michael Harris are doing something together as a team, that tells you a lot of, I'm disappointed in that, because if it weren't for me, you'd still be in prison.
You know that old saying about how lies can keep going and going until the truth finally breaks through? Well, it looks like November 9th, 2023 might just be that breakthrough moment. Recent reports have revealed they've caught the person behind Tupac's tragic death. And hold on to your hats, because it seems Snoop Dogg might be under the spotlight too. Why? Because Suge Knight's case is being reopened.
You turn around and you say you partners up with this dude, neither one of y'all got death row or bought death row or purchased death row.
In one instance, Suge Knight has come forward with new details about the 90s West Coast hip-hop scene, claiming he played a crucial role in the Snoop Dogg case. The latest episode of Collect Call with Suge Knight, which aired on November 9th through Dave May's Breakbeat Media, explores how the former Death Row Records boss says he saved Snoop Dogg from a possible life sentence.
What you mean when you say that he'd still be in prison?
Because when Snoop got convicted for the...
In another instance, Knight boldly stated, "If it weren't for me, Snoop would still be in prison doing life," as he recounted the events leading to the infamous trial. Back in 1993, Snoop Dogg and his former bodyguard Malik were facing first and second degree M charges related to the death of Philip Little Smooth Woldemariam in Los Angeles. Knight talked about the legal plan and a key moment. The lawyer said, "Well, the bodyguard has a 9mm, so we can't say he protected Snoop and shot the guy. Snoop had a .380. I said, "We'll be effed if the bodyguard had a .380 and Snoop had a 9mm and he got shot with a .380, right? He got shot with a 9mm. But since Snoop had the .380 and the bodyguard had a 9mm, and he got shot with a .380, all the bodyguard gotta say is he was using .380 bullets in his 9mm. Knight went on to talk about his involvement and said that he had spent $6 million to finish up the loose ends. This meant ending an attempt at blackmail in Snoop's group and even meeting with a private investigator to clear the air. Knight says that this action caused an alleged tape that could be used against them to be
got through a gang sign to them, they'd start chasing them in a Jeep like that. They shoot. And the guy shot his...
Suge Knight has raised questions about Snoop Dogg's right to run Death Row Records, saying that the rapper may have gotten the label through shady means. In an audio recording that TMZ revealed in April 2023, Knight, who is in jail at the moment, talked about Snoop's job as the owner and CEO of Death Row. Knight says that Snoop's involvement with the label is connected to a crime that he and Michael Harris, a convicted lord who helped start Death Row Records with money, are said to have committed together.
Correct.
Right.
Yep.
If you look at it, they committed fraud. They committed bankruptcy fraud. I didn't lose my company by doing anything wrong.
When asked what he thought about Snoop's ownership, Knight said he didn't think Snoop was the true owner of the famous label from the 1990s. Knight then said that Harris was committing bankruptcy fraud, which he says he and his lawyers found out just a week before the taped call. Snoop has a partner, which is Michael Harris, right? The 58-year-old told the outlet. If you look at it, they committed bankruptcy fraud. I didn't lose my company by doing anything wrong. They went in, and the lawyer didn't show up, and they got a default judgment. I settled the judgment. They turned around and said I didn't settle the judgment. Knight says that the sale of death row was not only illegal, but also a crime. He says that Harris's wife and legal team knew they were taking part in the scheme that led to the bankruptcy claim in 1995. Knight says that when they filed for bankruptcy, they flatly denied having any ties to death row, and he claims that their lawyer knew they were lying.
And the lawyer didn't show up, and they got a default judgment. I settled the judgment. They turned around and said I didn't settle the judgment, but they committed.
Knight continues his case by pointing out the legal problems with the sale and purchase of death row records in light of Harris's previous bankruptcy filing. He vehemently opposes rewarding someone who he thinks did a terrible crime against black people by trying to take their property and give it to white people. Knight strongly feels that he and death row are inseparable, stating his resolve to take back the name he helped create. He stated, "You can't take a person who committed the worst crime of the century to take death row from black people to try to give it to white people," he said, "and think you're gonna turn around and reward and say he's gonna grab Snoop and he's gonna go get it back and have death row. It don't work like that. So if we're gonna talk about something, let's talk about it." Even though Snoop Dogg said in February 2022 that he had bought death row records through a deal with MNRK Music Group, Knight was still sure that the label belonged to him. "I am death row," he said. Suge Knight is death row, which shows that he is resolute in his desire to stay connected to the label he helped build.
And you can't commit bankrupt fraud and settle and do those type of things. So the same guy you see in the series, when you see all of his deposition in prison.
As of February 2022, it was known that Snoop had bought death row records through a deal with MNRK Music Group. There were, however, no details about the deal made public. The news made Snoop say something, which was a turning point in the rap legend's long and successful career. "I am thrilled and appreciative of the opportunity to acquire the iconic and culturally significant Death Row Records brand, which has immense untapped future value," shared the Gin and Juice rapper. "It feels good to have ownership of the label I was part of at the beginning of my career and as one of the founding members. This is an extremely meaningful moment for me. I would like to personally thank the teams at Blackstone, MNRK, and especially David Kestenbaum, who worked collaboratively with me over several months to make this exciting homecoming a reality. I'm looking forward to building the next chapter of Death Row Records." On the other hand, Snoop has said that he dodged an attack by Death Row and ended up in jail. According to Snoop Dogg on BAT's No Limit Chronicles, he almost died when people loyal to Suge Knight, who was CEO of Death Row Records at the time, attacked him. In May 1998, this happened behind the scenes at the No Limit Records I Got the Hookup comedy jam in Los Angeles. Knight's friends approached Snoop about comments he had made about Knight after Snoop had just left Death Row for No Limit Records. Knight said that Snoop had gone from being a superstar to a No Limit soldier. When asked about this, Snoop said nothing. He also said he used to be a CEO, now he's just an inmate. It looks like Snoop was pointing the middle finger at Knight when he did this. During the argument backstage, Knight's friends circled Snoop and told him he needed to say sorry to Knight. When Snoop's response didn't satisfy them, a physical altercation ensued. Snoop managed to escape unscathed, but chaos erupted. The other No Limit rappers, including Master P, halted their on-stage performance to rush to Snoop's aid.
Suge Knight made money in rap. Master P put money in rap.
Break that down for me.
Big difference. When I was on Death Row Records, we made a lot of fucking money.
In the midst of chaos, with gunshots blasting in the background, the crowd's confusion sparked a riot. Snoop Dogg managed to dodge the attack, but his night took a wild turn. While trying to escape, he ran straight into the cops who found weed on him. He ended up handcuffed and in the back of a police car. "I get a whizzy, no cuts, no scars, no hits, no nothing," Snoop said, "but I run right into the law, with weed in my pocket and everything because I'm trying to save my life. They handcuffed me. They put me in back of the police car." That night, Snoop Dogg and his cousin, rapper Daz Dillinger, ended up in jail for possession. To their surprise, they ran into a familiar face, Ray J, when they got there. Laughing about it, Snoop said, "They take me and my cousin Daz to jail, and when we get in there, Ray J is in there, so we spend 4 hours in jail with Ray J. I'm not fabricating this, man. I'm not making this up." What's even more shocking is the connection to Snoop's M charge. In an interview on the Black Effect Podcast Network with Cam Capone News' McKinley Lee Jr., Snoop Dogg's former bodyguard gave a detailed account of the 1,993 M of a rival gang member that led to first-degree M charges for both Snoop and Lee.
When I tell you this story, you're going to find out that
it was about Snoop, but it really wasn't about Snoop because they knew the truth. And then
one August afternoon, after a heated run-in with some known gang members outside Snoop Dogg's West Los Angeles apartment, Snoop and his bodyguard Lee found themselves facing those same folks again. Lee Jr. recounted, "We heard some commotion downstairs and I'm thinking, I know Snoop didn't go outside without me. He grabbed his gun and headed downstairs with Snoop right behind him." Lee went on, "I stop at the end of the stairs and I see a guy leaning out of a car. He can't see me, and he's just barking back and forth with one of the guys. I can't really remember exactly what he looked like, but I just saw the light-skinned face, and then I saw a gun come out of the window. So at that time, there was no threat. Snoop was right here. It wasn't anything. It was just real quick. I take off and get Snoop upstairs." Thinking things had settled down, Lee and Snoop hopped into a truck to head to the studio and continue working on Snoop's debut album, Doggy Style. But when they realized they'd forgotten a recording device, Snoop, who was driving, made a U-turn to go back to the apartment. On the way, they saw someone in the street trying to flag them down. The person explained that the guy who had pulled the gun was diabetic and had just forgotten to take his medicine. While they were talking, McKinley Lee Jr. noticed some movement in the bushes and saw Philip Little Smooth Woldemariam emerge. Woldemariam walked up to the man who pushed him away. According to Lee, the man then lifted his shirt, showing a weapon and seemed like he was reaching for it. Lee described the tense moment. "When I saw him start to reach, that's when I took my gun and I fired. There was like a little incline. My hope was I wanted to hit him in the lower part of his body, so as I'm aiming, he's turning, and as I'm aiming here, I fire. When he was turning, he got hit in the hip and in the shoulder blade. Unfortunately, the one that went through his hip went through him and his shoulder. He takes off and he runs. We find out that when he ran, he dropped about 50 yards or 75 yards away. He dropped right there, and that's unfortunately when he died." Lee also mentioned that Woldemariam's friends quickly grabbed the gun, making it impossible for the police to trace it when they arrived. Despite everything, Lee and Snoop Dogg chose to wait before turning themselves in, until after the 1993 MTV Video Music Awards. "After we made the call, we had to wait for our attorneys," Lee explained. "So the next day they came, and that's when we were going to turn ourselves in. We didn't turn ourselves in the next day. We had to wait, so we waited until everything calmed down." Snoop was at the MTV Video Music Awards and they came to arrest him. I wasn't, so I had to wait until everything died down, and that's when we decided it was best. Police had already known what was going on because we said we were going to turn ourselves in. Snoop Dogg and McKinley Lee Jr. were charged with first-degree M and faced trial in 1995. During the trial, it came out that Jason London, a friend of Woldemariam, had hidden the gun to protect his friend. With the help of famous lawyer Johnny Cochran, Snoop and Lee were acquitted on February 20th, 1996. After the trial, Snoop decided to stop rapping about M, which disappointed some fans and friends. In a January chat with Fatman Scoop, Snoop explained, "On my second album, The Dogfather, when I beat my M case, I redirected my pen to write life because I felt like I had written death all up until that point. When I started writing The Dogfather, I lost a lot of fans. I lost a lot of homies because they wanted me to keep it gangsta after beating the M case. They wanted me to glamorize and glorify, but I was like, somebody's life was lost. My life has changed. This is a real situation." Suge Knight has been pretty vocal about how he feels about losing control of Death Row Records. He's been expressing a lot of frustration, claiming he was unfairly pushed out. He said, "They tried to F me out of my company," and pointed fingers at Snoop Dogg and Michael Harris, who were big players in the early days of Death Row. Knight explained how his ownership of Death Row was threatened after he filed for bankruptcy in 2006. He claims this happened because of a default judgment in court that he says was a mistake. He talked about this in a jail call with TMZ earlier in the year, accusing Snoop and Harris of bankruptcy fraud to take over the label. According to Knight, he didn't lose Death Row because of anything he did wrong. Instead, he says that Snoop and Harris took advantage of a situation where his lawyer didn't show up, leading to a default judgment that Knight thought he had settled. Even though Snoop and Harris officially bought Death Row in 2022, Knight doesn't recognize their claim to ownership. He also pointed out that Snoop wouldn't be where he is today without Knight's support during his time at Death Row. For Snoop to say he and Michael Harris are doing something as a team, that tells you I'm disappointed in that mother effer because if it wasn't for me, you'd still be in prison doing life, Knight stated on Collect Call. You turn around and say you've partnered up with this dude. Neither one of y'all got death row or bought death row or purchased death row. He also elaborated on his role in Snoop's 1996 case, saying he played a crucial part in Snoop's acquittal. Knight claimed that initially Snoop's legal team was unsure they could prove his innocence, but after Knight allegedly paid off a key witness who was going to testify against Snoop, Snoop ended up with a not guilty verdict. Suge Knight has been pretty open about his involvement in legal battles and the music industry. He's really let down by Snoop Dogg's partnership with Michael Harris, whom Knight accuses of defrauding him. Knight questioned Snoop's loyalty, saying, "I risked my own freedom to keep this guy from going to prison, and now he teams up with Michael Harris, who committed fraud against me, and they're trying to take death row? You should have worked to return it to its rightful owner. You didn't represent death row well when you were part of it." In the second part of the discussion, Knight shared another story about Dr. Dre, who joined death row in the early 90s. According to Knight, Dre asked for his help to get a gun illegally. Knight set up a connection with a dealer, which ended up leading to his own arrest for involvement. He faced a tough choice: either serve jail time himself or let Dre face the legal music. Knight decided to take the fall for Dre, spending a short stint in jail before getting probation. Knight also claimed he stepped in to make sure Dre didn't end up in jail for other issues during their time working together. Meanwhile, former gang leader Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, who's been charged with Tupac Shakur's M, has reportedly told police that Sean Diddy Combs paid $1 million to have Tupac. Court documents filed on July 18th by the Clark County District Attorney's Office and obtained by Fox 5 show that Davis claimed he was only confessing to his own involvement and wasn't trying to implicate anyone else. However, this statement belies this claim, as he suggested that Sean Combs paid dealer Eric Von Martin $1 million for the as well as offered to set up a surreptitious phone call with Terrence Brown, the driver, who, at the time, was still alive. Davis, who's now 61, reportedly named Combs, 54, during a 2009 interview with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police. He told them that the Bad Boy Records executive, whose artist Notorious Big was in a heated East Coast-West Coast rap feud with Shocker, allegedly said, "I would give anything for that dude's head," referring to Suge Knight, who ran the rival Death Row Records. Davis also claimed that Eric Von Martin, the alleged hitman, ended up making a lot of money years after the M. This new filing brings up an old rumor about Combs' supposed involvement in Shakur's death. Shakur was shot 4 times in a drive-by shooting in Las Vegas on September 7, 1996. Back in 2003, Kirk Burroughs, who was the godfather of one of Combs' sons and a former president, filed a $25 million lawsuit in Manhattan alleging that Combs was suspected of hiring Shakur's shooter. Combs' attorney at the time, Benjamin Brafman, dismissed these claims as entirely baseless, and the lawsuit was eventually thrown out. The rumors didn't stop there. In 2011, former LAPD detective Greg Kading reignited the speculation in his book M-Rap, claiming that Combs ordered Shocker's M-Codding, also said the LAPD had recorded confessions from people involved in the killings, including an audio clip from Davis, who supposedly told police, "Combs took me downstairs and said, 'Man, I want to get rid of those dudes.'" According to Kading's book, it was Davis's nephew, Orlando Baby Lane Anderson, who actually pulled the trigger. Kading had worked on both Shakur and Notorious B.I.G.'s M cases before being removed from the investigations. An investigator recently shared with New York Magazine that his commander once told him, "This is being done to protect you," back in the day. Despite all the chatter, there haven't been any criminal charges, indictments, or convictions against Combs related to this case. Page 6 reported that sources familiar with the investigation confirm there's no ongoing probe or new information about Mr. Combs in these claims. Law enforcement sources also told TMZ that Combs has never been a suspect in the investigation. Meanwhile, Snoop Dogg once shared a personal story on Logan Paul's Impulsive podcast about visiting Tupac after the rapper was hospitalized following the 1996 Las Vegas shooting that led to his death at 25. At the time, both Snoop and Tupac were signed to Death Row Records, which Suge Knight co-founded. They had recently worked together on Tupac's hit single 2 of America's Most Wanted from his All Eyes on Me album. Snoop, now 50, remembered rushing to the hospital after hearing about Tupac's condition. "When we drive to Vegas to see Pac, we got to Suge House first, so we haven't even seen Pac," said Snoop. "We just talking to Suge, and he got the head wrapped up and he telling us what happened and saying, 'Pac gonna be alright, he going to pull through, he got shot 9 times before he going to be alright.' We feeling like it's gonna be alright until we go to the hospital and see that it ain't alright. He got tubes in him, he continued. When I walked in, I could just feel like he wasn't even there and I fainted. Snoop Dogg shared a touching moment he had with Tupac's mother, Afeni Shakur, during Tupac's hospitalization. She was like, "My baby ain't never seen you weak. I don't want you to be weak in front of him," he detailed. "You go in the bathroom and fix yourself up, and you go back in there and you talk to him and you tell him how you feel." At that time, Snoop and Tupac weren't on the best terms due to some personal drama, but Afeni encouraged Snoop to set aside their differences and be there for Tupac. She told him, "My baby loves you." She knew there was a little tension, but she knew how much we loved each other, Snoop explained. "So she gave us a moment for me to say some things to him as far as how much I love him, but I knew that that was gonna be my last time speaking with him." That's all for the video, folks. Thanks for watching.